Okay, testing, testing. Okay, can I get your name and where you're from, sir?
Paul Perreault, and I am from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, world.
And what do you consider your occupation to be?
I am a professional circus artist and street performer.
Now, how long have you been doing this?
I have been a street performer since 2002, and I graduated from the National Circus School in 2007. So I've been a professional circus artist since then.
And how did you get started with this line of work?
Well, long story short, after I graduated from college with a leisure studies degree, I decided to organize a summer camp, but I started too late and I blew my friends' money. And I said, all right, stick around with me. We'll travel around Canada. We'll juggle. I'll earn your money back. And that's basically how I got started.
And did you earn his money back?
Yeah, we had 7 years of a good career together afterwards.
That's good to hear. How did it go tonight?
Tonight went really, really well. I had great weather, which is always a bonus. I had great audiences who were willing to clap, cheer, laugh. They were on the same page as I was. I did no hecklers. People were generous at the end. There's reasons to come back next year.
How often do you get hecklers?
Whenever it's dark.
Why do you think that is?
People drink. Yeah.
What's the worst heckling you've ever endured?
Well, 2 nights ago, one gentleman came up and was grabbing my juggling knives, and then he's interrupting, shouting things, yelling, swearing. Finally, I literally walked him off the stage, opened up my audience, and walked him out and prompted my audience to close up tight so he couldn't get back in after 15 minutes of awkwardness.
Oh my goodness. Is that among the worst things that you've had to deal with?
Well, I've been threatened to be stabbed.
With your own knives?
No, with a homeless guy's actual switchblade knife.
Oh my god.
I've had all sorts of things. Lots of stories. Come say hi and say, Paul, tell me a heckler story and I'll have lots.
Hello and welcome to the CFCR Fringe Flyer for Thursday, August 9th. I'm Ishmael Darrow. If you do see Paul on Broadway, feel free to talk to him. He's a very nice guy, and he usually performs part of his show shirtless, so you should be able to pick him out. The Fringe Flyer plays each weekday at 5:30 during the Buzz, and if you miss these segments, you can catch them at cfcr.ca. You can listen to previous episodes there. Also, if you want to win 2 free tickets to go see some Fringe plays, just email contests@cfcr.ca. That's contests, plural, at cfcr.ca. Just give us your name and your membership number, and you can come pick up a few tickets. The Fringe runs until August 11th. That's Saturday, so it's almost over, so try to get as much fringing in there as possible. On today's show, we've got 2 interviews, one with Vancouver magician Travis Bernhardt. His show is called Lies. It plays at the Oskayak Gym. And later, a conversation with Kristen Holfeuer and Matt Voyno. Their show is For the U. That plays at the Victoria School Upstairs Auditorium. That's all coming up in the next half hour, so don't go anywhere. This is the CFCR Fringe Flyer on Saskatoon's community radio station 90.5 FM. There are 2 kinds of magicians. Those who claim to see into the spirit world, read your mind, and bend spoons with their thoughts. Then there are those who tell you that none of that is real and that they are the biggest liars of all. Travis Bernhardt is of the latter category. He is a magician from Vancouver, BC, and his show Lies plays at the Oskayak High School Gym, and there's only one show left, tomorrow at 7:40 p.m. He was in studio earlier today for a wide-ranging conversation about his show, his career, and about magic in general. Thank you for joining me.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, I've always wondered about, I think most people see magicians when they're much more polished, but those early days,
right.
What was that like? And did you have disastrous shows where it just didn't work out?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. It's not so much that I had disastrous shows because most of that time is spent in your room by yourself, alone, practicing. And it's only when you get kind of like, well, maybe that would work for a real person that you bring it out in front of people and try it. And then what you generally discover as a magician is that the standard you have in your head of how good you'd have to be to fool somebody with a trick is actually not as high as you think. With most people, they're quite happy to just go along with whatever you're doing and to look where you want them to look. And I found that it was surprisingly easier than I thought it would be, actually, once I actually tried some tricks in front of people. And the performance side of things, though, was what took some time, because the trick itself is one thing, and the nice thing about doing magic is it has a certain kind of inherent power to it. So even if you're not a performer, it's kind of a good way into performance, because if you stand in front of a crowd, do a trick successfully, they'll applaud, even if your personality is pretty distant and uninviting. And that's not good enough, of course, to really, I guess, make a living at it, really. Although, well, it depends on who you ask, I suppose. But what I did next was I got into street performing, and the great thing about street performing is it puts you in front of all sorts of different people. You do show after show after show after show after show. You do hundreds, thousands of hours of performing, and it's really hard to get that kind of stage time any other way. To try to get that many hours worth of stage time just by getting booked would take you years, but you can do on the street in a short span of time a huge amount of work. And the other thing about that too is it's very sink or swim, that if you don't learn to have some kind of showmanship or the very least structure, then people won't stop and watch. I mean, or they'll stop for a second and they'll move on, or you can't hold the crowd, or so it's a great way to train as a performer, although it does give you some bad habits, I suppose. And you tend to be a little more aggressive than you might be otherwise.
But you seem so laid back.
Well, I am not typical street performer, it's true, but I do suffer for that on the street. Like, my show is not as big, is not as gigantic crowds as some of the people, so the street performers get. And I think that it's true. Like, for me, it's one thing that happens to a lot of street performers is their jokes do get, a little bit obvious, and their shows get a little bit lowest common denominator. But I find that the good street performers still find ways to rise above that. It's impossible to do street performing without some kind of, I guess, sales technique or some kind of hard sell aspect to it. If you try doing a street show and, say, not asking for money at the end, just putting out your hat and suggesting by putting out your hat that they ought to put money in it, you won't get paid. So you have to tell the people to pay you. And so these kind of things, in some people's minds, create a kind of crass, sales-like atmosphere in a street show. And I think it's true that some street performers take that too far.
So you got your 10,000 hours in on the street.
I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but it's getting there.
So when you first transitioned to the stage, I imagine one of the comforts is that there's no people behind you. You can't you can't get bum rushed.
No, that's true. I mean, well, okay. So I think somebody said, I think it was Matt King who said that, all magic can be done surrounded. It just depends on whether or not you care that people can see how it's done. So that is true. I think I'm a little more at home on the stage. Like, my indoor show, Lies, 7:40 Friday, is going to be, it's a little more me than my street show. But there's something about the street, though, when it works, which you can't get anywhere else. And it's this kind of, this feeling of freedom or playfulness. Kind of anything can happen, because anything kind of can happen, I mean, well, the worst that's going to happen in a regular theater is the fire alarm will go off or the lights will go out or something, and that never happens, really. So, but the street, you're dealing with distractions all the time, and that kind of thing keeps you very alive and in the moment, or should.
Or you could just crumble at the first time.
Exactly, or you could just crumble. That's another option. I've done that one.
My guest today is Travis Bernhardt. His magic show, Lies, plays at the Oskayak Gym, and you can see it tomorrow at 7:40 p.m. Now, Travis, you make this clear in the show, which I saw yesterday, but I'll let you put it in your own words. Why call it Lies?
Well, several reasons. But I think the main reason is that it really just attacks the heart of what it is that I'm doing on stage directly. There's this thing that happens with magicians where, and I've seen this happen, I just think it's awful, and I've seen it happen so many times where somebody say, well, you got any more tricks for us? No, not tricks. Illusions. and which is perfectly satirized in Arrested Development, of course. But I've seen it happen in real life. Like, I don't think anybody in real life should not do anything that's been satirized on Arrested Development, but I've seen it happen. And my feeling is, if you go to, suppose you take somebody to a surprise party, right? And you lie to them and you say, "Oh yeah, we just have to go pick up something before we go out for dinner. Come in with me. I just have to get my coat or whatever." And then you walk in, everybody jumps out, surprise, and oh my God, you totally tricked me. No. It was shut up, right? Like,
right.
People understand that it's a lie. And I think that what was fun for me was the idea that, well, okay, we're doing a magic show. What if we did a magic show where we didn't pretend, and we just came right up front with it and said, yeah, we're lying to you, but that's great. That's the whole point. And it's fun, and it's a game that we play with each other on stage in a theater. And so then for me at that point, the task was finding tricks that could support that theme, tricks that sort of addressed the kinds of lies that we tend to tell on stage. I think the theme is broad. I mean, it's a broad theme. Magic is a very, specific way to get at that. It's a very sharp way to get at that because all theater is a kind of lie, in a way. But magic is kind of like that little subset, that really pointy-end subset of theater where that lie is just honed to a little knife edge, and it's all about that lie. And I thought it might be fun to explore that in the context of a magic show.
So there's, perhaps you'd like to maybe explain a bit more of your technique, because I think there's different kinds of magicians. There's mentalists who do more of the quote-unquote mind-reading stuff.
Right.
Sleight of hand, card tricks. What would you say is maybe...
I would say I'm, for the most part, a sleight of hand performer. Most of what I do is based on manipulation, although I'm not a quote-unquote manipulator, which is generally what you would refer to somebody who produces fans of cards or things like that. I tend to prefer tricks that have some kind of a plot aside from just making things appear or disappear. Not to say that I don't do those, I love those as well, but I think that a steady diet of that gets a little bit old after a while. Like, yeah, you can make stuff appear and disappear. Like, what else you got, kind of a thing. I like to have some kind of texture throughout the show. I do a little bit of mind-reading stuff in lies. That's new for me. I've always resisted going there for a few reasons, partially just because I never quite could figure out how I thought I would sell it.
Right.
It's a little bit of a stretch, especially because my personality and the way that I perform magic is very much, like I said, very direct and very straightforward. And I feel like the lie that you tell when you say you're reading somebody's mind is just a little bit too... It's a little bit too close to not a lie, in a way. Like, because people believe that stuff. People believe it's possible.
But then the onus is on them not to truly believe that you can see into their mind.
Right. I mean, I'm sure. I guess there's nothing you can do, right? I mean, I think that you can sit there and you can say, everything I'm about to do is a trick. And there'll be somebody in the audience who at the end comes up and is like, yeah, I'm amazed. That was amazing. You could really read minds. And, my sister has a problem, health problems. And and you're just like, oh God, like, were you not listening?
I'm not a faith healer.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what, though? You'll get that doing any kind of magic. You'll get somebody at some point who will come up and they just kind of believe it. And that's really awkward. But
well, what I like about your show is that you're very upfront about what it is you do. And there are obviously some magicians who do say that I can bend this spoon with my mind.
Right, exactly, yeah.
But it seems to me that I'm a casual fan of magic, but it seems to me there are two kinds of magicians. The ones who try to sell you on the magic and fairy dust, and others like yourself who are very, they're skeptics, and they use magic as a way to educate you about maybe magical thinking and superstition. There's
a really great thinker on magic in the States named Whit Hayden. He's a wonderful magician, a great performer, one of my idols. And he said a lot of intelligent things about magic. And I think one of the things that I like that he says is that magic is really good. Magic has limited... utility, I guess, when it comes to like teaching people things. I think that sometimes people try to put too much on magic and try to layer it with too much meaning or depth. And I think that at heart, it's entertainment. It's fairly light entertainment, but it does have some subtext. And I think that the core subtext is that things are not always as we think they are. The main thing being that I think personally for me though, magic is a little bit about challenging people's beliefs. For example, if they If they did believe in some psychic phenomena, you could use magic to say, well, I can do something that looks like that. And I can show you how maybe the thing that you saw might not be the thing that you thought that you saw. But there's ambiguity there because magicians, despite being a skeptical lot for the most part, we draw very heavily on the cultural understanding of magic and people's expectations about it. So simultaneously, we use the trappings of magic to kind of puncture the idea of magic itself, which is paradoxical, but I think one of the things that also makes magic kind of interesting for me.
Right, you need people to believe in some corner of their mind that maybe this guy actually did make that item disappear. But at the same time,
you need them to kind of to at least be willing to entertain the fantasy to some degree. Although I would say that it's not that you're getting them to suspend disbelief like in theater. You are, but only in the sense of your character as a magician. They suspend disbelief when they look at you as your character or persona on stage. But the magic itself, you don't want them to suspend disbelief. You want them to actively disbelieve. You want them to be trying to bust you. Funny thing about magic, it's one of the few things where we play this game with each other where the audience is only happy if they lose. Like they're trying really hard to bust you, and they're only satisfied if you win. And that's a highly unusual situation to be in.
My guest is Travis Bernhardt, and his show is Lies. Quickly, before we go, each lie you tell in the show, for example, I can read your mind, or I can make this lemon disappear, for example. Those are lies. Have you done a full count of how many lies you tell in one show?
For this one, I did actually, but it's hard because it depends on how you count it. But my current sort of estimate count is there's about 400, give or take. By some counts, a little higher than that. By some counts, a little less, because it depends on whether you count every particular physical action as a lie, or whether if you break an action down to component parts, or I don't know.
But you do lie to the audience continuously
for the whole show, and you end up being lied to about 400 times in the course of the hour. So yes.
Well, it's an enjoyable experience being lied to. Anyhow, Travis Bernhardt, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Once again, that's Travis Bernhardt, and his magic show is called Lies. It plays at the Oskayak Gym, and there's only one show left, playing tomorrow at 7:40 p.m. Saskatoon's Kristen Holfeuer is the main performer in For the U, and I say performer very deliberately because it is a performance more than anything else. Basically, it's Holfeuer in the middle of a well-lit room with the audience around her, and she runs around, she sings, she cries, she does say words, but they're very hard to make out, and you're meant to make connections on your own without necessarily a clear plot or any other direction from Holfeuer. 1 second she might stand on a chair and scream at the top of her lungs, and the next she might be cowering in the corner, whimpering. It's a very inventive piece, and one of the edgier pieces you might see at the Fringe this year. So even though it might not be for everyone, if you're up for a challenge, you should check out For the U. In addition to Holfeuer, there's Voyno, who does the soundscape, and I had a chance to talk to both of them yesterday after a performance of For the U.
I think I ran into you on the street the other day, Kristen, and you had just seen a play, and I asked you how it was, and you said, it won't change my life. I think I know what you mean now. That was an experience, like you said at the top of the show, but I don't know how I would put it in words. How would you describe the show to somebody who hasn't seen For the U?
Well, I have this pre-show chat that I'm now experimenting with. And in it, I say that if a crow alights on a branch and the branch breaks, we make a connection out of that. Humans are meaning-making machines, and we crave stories and narrative to help us make sense of our lives. And this show is full of events, no literal crows landing on branches, but things that the audience can make meaning out of if they so choose. But really, watching the show is like an experience, like a journey And you can just enjoy the experience. You don't have to make meaning of it if you don't want to. Or you can sort of float in between those two existences. Or maybe nothing will happen for you, and if that's the case, I'm sorry. But that's, I think, the experience of watching the show, and my hope is that the audience will come with an alive and open mind, and that they will put themselves into the show and find some meaning for themselves.
So what was the genesis of For the You?
It came out of training. I was going, I revisited a professor that I had and have really enjoyed working with, and I said, I feel like I need to be working again. And he's really great, and he says, he has a rehearsal space, and he says, if you come, I will just be there. And we had a conversation as well, and we talked about what was on my mind. And I've been thinking a lot about my grandmother and about how her life had changed. Like, she was living in New Orleans before the hurricane and after Katrina, and then eventually it was too hard to live there, and she moved to Arkansas. And so I was thinking a lot about, I had just visited New Orleans and helped her move to Arkansas, and I was thinking a lot about destruction by water, being sort of forced to leave where you live, and then the things that I learned, when being down in the South, and some of the stories I learned down there. So those things were on my mind. So as I started working and rehearsing and training, Raymond actually, and he's a director, was just watching, and these sort of things, these scenes, scenarios presented themselves, and we started to create the show physically through the things that I was doing in my training. And the training is like Grotowski based, and it's very associative. So I'll maybe improvise a movement, and when I'm doing that movement, it'll make me think all of a sudden that I'm like telling a small child, shh, shh, and I reach up with my other hand and I like pluck a star out of the sky and give it to that child. It might be something like that, or it might just be like this weird day when I imagined I was like, oh, this is so terrible, that I was like having a baby, and it was like really scary, and I didn't like it, and so that's something else. And it was just, I felt like when I was working on it that my body was just remembering things that it had experienced, but I had no memory of some of these things. I don't think they ever happened, so it was really weird.
That was when you were still putting it together, but is there any improvisation in the show now?
There can be. It's really highly scripted, though. Like, maybe Matt could talk more about that. I feel like the improvisation is more on his end with the music.
Yeah, I try to change something every single time. Every single time it is different for the soundscape, and Kristen and I, we try to, like, I watch her and I make choices about the sounds that I choose. Not only that, like, knowing that what she's done before, but just maybe something new in this moment that maybe we can both find. And it seems to work. Every single time there's a new point where we find something new, and it's definitely, there's parts that are scripted, but for me a lot of it is improvised.
It's more free for Matt.
Yeah.
And I think what changes is maybe the quality behind something, not necessarily a movement. So the movement will be the same, but the quality of it might not be as hard. It might be softer another day, or maybe it will be faster based on maybe what Matt has given me, or based just on that day. Based on the room, our rehearsal space is a lot bigger than this room, and I run all over it, and it's carpeted so I can fall all over it, and we actually knock the chair over, and all these things happen, and I have to make different choices in here because it's smaller. So everything's more contained. So in that way, I'm still improvising because I'm learning how to do it in a smaller space.
Because you're dealing with a different space.
Yeah, totally different atmosphere.
Now, what kind of reactions have you had from people so far?
It's been harder at the Fringe. I feel more disconnected from the audience because we have to quickly take down the set, and I don't always get to chat with people. Tonight we didn't have another show after hours, so I got to talk to the audience.
And we're talking right now. So.
Yeah, we're talking right now. But in other shows, it's just I got to get dressed and we got to take it down. So I don't really know, unfortunately, how this much more general public is receiving the show. My hope is that is that they go away and it stays with them and they really think about it and they really had some personal connection to it. I wish that I had the time, and if anyone ever sees me and wants to talk about it, that's great, to hear what their images were, because some people really want to talk about that. Like the one guy after the show tonight.
What did he say?
Well, I don't think he'd mind if I shared, but he was he's from California, and he was saying that once he was hiking and there was a cougar near him, and he had to do this like, I guess if you run away from a cougar, that it makes them want to chase you. It sort of instigates that feeling in them. And so he then sort of stood and like, yelled at the cougar, and he sort of remembered that, and he started thinking about like when he was living in California and all of his like experiences when he was out and camping, and that's cool. We've had other kids, before the Fringe we performed for high school students, and they were great. Their images were like crazy.
A child thought that, or a teenager thought that, in the beginning, Kristen comes out with a chair, and he thought she was pregnant with the world. Those were his words. Yeah. And that was like pretty... 15-year-old
high school students said that.
Yeah, and definitely that's part of like where something, a thought did come from in this whole world, I see it. It's interesting. People have different reactions. Mm-hmm. Definitely talking about it helps, I think.
Yeah. So that's what I learned from doing the Fringe, is actually a show like this needs room for conversation. And I need to make more room for that.
Kristen Holfeuer and Matt Voyno. The show is for the U. You can catch it 2 more times. There's a show tomorrow at 3:50 and one on Saturday at 6:30, and it plays at the Victoria School Upstairs Auditorium. And that's it for the show today. There's one Fringe flyer left. That'll be tomorrow at 5:30 right here on 90.5. And you can also go to CFCR.ca to listen to all the previous episodes if you missed any. Don't forget that you can win 2 tickets to see any Fringe show that you like. Email contests at CFCR.ca. That's contests, plural, at CFCR.ca. All we need is your name and your membership number, and those tickets are all yours. I'm Ishmael Darrow. Thank you so much for listening.
God, ce fut tellement bon cœur. Je tirais bien la queue du chien qui m'a mordu hier. Ma bite, cet homme, je suis mordu.